Family and friends, neighbors, and most of all, strangers, welcome to the Christian Chronicle podcast. We're bringing you the stories shaping Church of Christ congregations and members around the world. I'm B.T. Irwin. May what you are about to hear bless you and honor God. In my years of working in nonprofit community development, one of the questions I've learned to insist that we answer in any planning or strategy meeting is this one: what are the unintended consequences? We need to take a good long look at how what seems like a good idea could lead to consequences that are not good or useful for our overall mission. Once we have a handle on what we think could go wrong, we need to weigh it against what could go right and ask the hardest question: is the risk of what could go wrong worth what could go right? Jesus might call this counting the cost. Surveys show that national security, secure borders in particular, is of utmost importance to many of those who claim Christianity, especially the ones that researchers place in the evangelical Christian segment of the U.S. population. That segment includes those of us in the Church of Christ. This is one of the biggest reasons that evangelical Christians report supporting the new administration in Washington, D.C. That administration has been true to its word, fast-tracking new federal policies with the intention that they will keep the wrong people from entering the country. But as with almost anything in the public sector, there are what could be unintended consequences. For example, the Christian Chronicle recently reported how new federal policies are affecting international students who want to get their education at colleges and universities in our Church of Christ heritage. Some students who want to get to the United States to enroll at these schools are now unable. The reporter who wrote that story is Kenzie James, a senior multimedia journalism major at Harding University in Searcy, Arkansas. Kenzie is a native of Tallahassee, Florida, and was one of our 2 summer interns at the Christian Chronicle this year. The other was Andrew Renault, who you heard a few times this summer as he recorded news updates that we played at the top of our podcasts. Kenzie is back at school for her senior year, but taking time out to talk to us today. Kenzie, hello.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so a few episodes back, we had the Christian Chronicle's own incoming managing editor, Calvin Cockrell, and outgoing managing editor, Audrey Jackson. I think Calvin is 30 years old, and Audrey is still in her 20s. And we kind of half joked about how if a young person considers a career in journalism these days, her parents are likely to say, "Are you crazy? You're going to starve." So, I mean, if you're looking for stable employment and you want to make a lot of money, I don't think anybody's going to tell you to give journalism a try. So why are you at least open to journalism, Kenzie? What is the big draw for you toward that career path?
So right off the bat, I don't know, maybe my parents are on the extreme of this, but they never said that to me.
Okay.
When I told them I wanted to go to journalism, they've always been extremely supportive of what I wanted to do. So very grateful to them for that. Journalism, honestly, I started in high school because I just wanted to tell people stories. And that's been the big draw for me, is just making sure people's stories are represented, that their stories are told, because there's so many cool stories out there that are just really inspirational, that it's inspirational for me to learn about, to report on, just to see people's passion for things and to really see the ministry and how God works through them in the community. But on the serious side, there's stuff that people just need to know, whether it be legal or court cases or government, just anything that happens. Like, there's big things that people need to know that a lot of times doesn't get reported on. And so that's just part of the draw for that, is making sure people are aware of information they need to make decisions about how to interact with other people.
Can you tell us about the first story you ever, not like story, but like, what's the first time you put on your reporter hat and went out and reported a story on something?
Oh gosh. Maybe high school yearbook was actually how I got into journalism, and just doing stories. I did a lot of club stories, just featuring some of the different clubs around campus. But here at Harding, I think the first big one I did was Relay for Life. I was an assistant producer at that point, and I told my advisor, who is the staff supervisor for HCC, that I wanted to do a package about Relay for Life. It's a fundraiser, all-night fundraiser we do here. I'm sure you're familiar with it, being a Harding alum.
I can make a joke here about curfew, if you like.
Go for it.
All-night fundraiser, Harding University, curfew.
Yes.
But
people would sign out and stand on the front lawn all night, which Do they actually? Who knows? But so I did that with one of my friends who was a reporter at the time. And so we did kind of a look live shot to where I reported videos of her interviewing people on the front line, just reporting about what was going on around us. So that's kind of the first big story I did here.
Well, speaking of stories that you've written, you got to spend your summer as an intern in a real award-winning newsroom at the Christian Chronicle. How did that experience open your eyes or surprise you?
Wow, it was an incredible experience. I mean, just the great staff, great people there. I built great relationships with all of them and learned a lot from everybody at the office. I think the biggest way it changed was my writing. Honestly, when I'm editing now and writing my stories, I can still hear Bobby and Audrey's voices in my head.
Yeah.
And my brain will just go, oh, that's going to get edited out, or they're going to change it to say this instead. So that's just a little bit of a comedic bit that kind of developed out of the summer. But honestly, the biggest thing was it strengthened my feature writing. I tend to write a lot of hard news. Just working for HU16, the broadcast here, that's very hard, very fast. You only have 4 sentences to say the most important information.
Yeah.
So it really is expanding my storytelling skills with that. But also a big lesson I learned was in that viewing those big hard events through the lens of one person's story. And the big one with that, an example, was the Texas floods. So I did a story on Hensel Youth Christian Camp, and Andrew did one on Camp Bandino. And so just really looking at this big event, but instead just giving them the facts of this is what happened, this is how many people were hurt. It's taking the story of how are these people affected and then expanding it to the bigger picture. And that just really changed how I view those events.
Yeah. Let's go back to editing for just a second here, because this is something that people that consume news maybe never, ever think about. They may assume that a reporter just writes a story and puts it out there and that's that. But I had my first experience writing a story for the Christian Chronicle just this month. And it was fascinating to see it go through the editing process. So you said you can hear Audrey's and Bobby's voices in your head now when you're writing stuff. Can you give our non-news reporter listeners an idea of something you learned about editing this summer working at the Christian Chronicle?
Yeah. So one of the big pieces was just working with the big thing about news that I learned this summer was person first. It's always been person first, and I've known that, but just applying it to even that different level. So there is one, like my intro article. Actually, I hate writing about myself. Yeah. And so I was just thought one of the hardest parts for me is just making it not sanitized. And that was the big thing as I went in with Audrey. She was like, yeah, it's good, but we can make it much less sanitized and just like completely get your voice and your personality into the writing. And then a big one, like Bobby doesn't like the word it.
Bobby doesn't like the word it?
In stories, like using that as a noun. So it's like you write a story or you write a sentence and then end it. And then you start the next sentence, still talking about the same subject, but using the word it. No, it gets edited out every time. So that was one that I just automatically learned. Not that it's like taken out of my vocabulary completely, but I definitely don't use it nearly as much when writing.
All right. So this is a true story. I went to Harding University in the 1990s. I was an advertising minor. So I had to take I took journalism and PR classes there. And I had Dr. Jack Schock, who is still there at Harding. And one of the words to this day that I do not use is the word there, THERE, there.
Okay.
I don't remember why, but it was drilled into my head. Don't ever use the word there in a story that you write. And so anything I have written for 20 something years now does not have the word there in it because of that class at Harding University. True story. So you mentioned a couple of stories that you reported over the summer. Tell us you wrote quite a few, actually. There's going to be a link in this podcast to your archive. You wrote a lot of stories for one summer. So can you tell us which stories impacted you the most?
Yeah. Well, there's actually still a couple that haven't been published yet. So my archive's not completely dead yet. I think One of the biggest ones was the campus ministry conference. I drove down to Denton, Texas, just outside of Dallas, and reported on that live. Went to the conference, interviewed people there. And that was a huge experience just to be on ground reporting for newspaper, because a lot of the stuff we do here, sometimes we'll go to the events, but a lot of the times we're writing it before or after the event.
Yeah.
So the chance to be there in the moment and just like take down observations about it was really cool. And also just traveling alone for like work experience. That's the first time I've ever done like a work trip like that.
Yeah.
So just personally, that was a huge learning curve. There's one that hasn't been published yet about a coffee shop in Oklahoma. And that one was just fun. That one was one of my favorite stories, just to see the ministry of the founders and the executive team and their passion for the mission that they do was truly just like really inspiring, just energizing. Andrew was actually with me for those interviews, and he took our photos and also helped ask questions and have that conversation. But just, we both came away really inspired and energized to go write that story and tell the story of that coffee shop. So I'm really excited for people to see that one. And then one of the other big ones is actually what we're going to talk about today is the international policies.
Yeah.
One of my big interests and just kind of like side hobbies is like reading is true crime. And so just deep dive with the research and all that. I love doing all the research. So when I got this story, it was just really fun to dive into. It's also just such an important story that a lot of people are like, all this stuff is going on, but we don't really know what it means or how it affects us.
Yeah, I want to get into that story in a minute, but before I do, I want to circle back to, you're a multimedia journalism major, and you just referenced true crime. Christian Chronicle readers who like read every story we put out know that you did a true crime podcast. People who listen to this show may not know that. So I bet we have some true crime fans who are listening to this. So could you tell us about making an actual true crime podcast? What went into that and how did it turn out?
Yeah, it was for a class. So I had about a month to put it together, where a lot of true crime podcasts will take multiple months. So I was already kind of on an abbreviated schedule with that. That definitely added to the stress of making sure I got all the information, but also getting it all right. I reported on a cold case and a closed case here in White County over in Bald Mountain. And just there's some circumstantial evidence connecting the cases. They were both murders of high school girls. So it was a very heavy, very interesting topic to learn about, but also it just kind of along the same lines with the cold case. Like their stories, this full story was never completely told. Like there's just a lot of information we still don't know. So just really being able to help tell their stories a little bit more to keep that memory of the girls. But it was fun. I brought a couple of my friends onto the podcast to read it with me, to kind of do a cold read, just so I could get to see their reactions and just like how people's minds process this. Because at that point, I kind of already knew everything, but it was cool to see people start from scratch and try to build the case with me. And I was there to help them. But it was good. I think for a first time, it turned out pretty okay. I was happy with how the story turned out. The audio, some of the technical sides of it aren't exactly my strengths. I'm definitely much more on the storytelling. That's why I'm in print journalism.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's half bad. So I'm not telling people to go listen to it. But if there are true crime listeners and they're interested in stories from Arkansas, they're welcome to go listen to it. It's on Spotify and YouTube.
We'll link it anyway. It's called Case Closed, right?
Yes.
All right. Everybody go check out Kenzie's true crime podcast, Case Closed, right after you're done listening to this. Okay, so back to the last story that the Christian Chronicle published from you prior to recording this episode. It's a story that rings all the bells for what we in the news business call relevant and timely. You reported on how changes to federal policies and the execution of those policies is affecting international students who want to enroll and study at colleges and universities in our Church of Christ heritage. How did this story come about for you? The best of our ministers love the Lord Jesus Christ and want to know and understand his teachings in every cell of their bodies. And what's more, they want to lead the church and its neighbors into the joy and wonder of what they discover as their biblical imaginations expand through practice and study. There's a whole new world in the Bible, and good ministers want to take their people on an adventure through it. That is what Freed-Hardeman University's Master of Arts in Ministry is all about, guiding ministers on a journey to maturity in biblical theology and ministry practice. Take it from me, a graduate program like this is a life-changing experience and a real opportunity for God to work on you in a mighty way. Look, the folks at Freed-Hardeman University know it may be hard for busy ministers just to find time to make microwave macaroni and cheese. That's why they created a flexible, real-time online format that fits both your location and your schedule. You can go to grad school from anywhere without giving up the depth of instruction and study and the richness of relationships with peers and professors. Listeners to this show can apply for free right now. There is no cost or obligation to find out if this is right for you. And scholarships are available to everyone. You don't have to carry a 4.2 GPA from undergrad or have a varsity letter in football. You just have to want it. So check out Freed-Hardeman University's Master of Arts in Ministry now at fhu.edu/chronicle. That's fhu.edu/chronicle.
I honestly don't even remember. We were sitting in a meeting in June. It was just after our June deadline, so we just got the July edition off to press. Andrew and Audrey and I went to Bobby's office. Andrew and I were we needed more story ideas to keep looking into. And so we were just sitting down, going through stories that people had submitted to the Chronicle, just kind of talking about the big news events at the time and looking for that Church of Christ connection to could we report on it. And somehow, I don't remember who brought it up. I think it was Audrey. But we started talking about the countries being banned because at that point in time, Marco Rubio had released a list of 36 countries that could be banned if they didn't make some adjustments to their security. And so we were talking about it, and then it just kind of snowballed into the idea of, well, how is this affecting college students with visas? Because a lot of those countries, their visas were also restricted for who could come into the U.S. And then I started thinking about, well, Harding has a program that goes into Zambia, and Zambia is on that list. So I was just kind of curious about looking into seeing how other Christian universities were affected, were students being affected by this. And so Bobby and Audrey kind of gave us the green flag to run with it. And we did it for a while. Actually, didn't get a lot of responses back from the universities. And so I didn't even know that there was going to be a story. Because I think there's still be impacted, but if no one's going to talk to me about it, there's only so much I can do.
Yeah.
And then I got off the phone with, I don't remember which one it was, but one of the university's primary designated officials, their PDSO. And I got off the interview and I looked at Andrew and I said, there's a story here.
Yeah.
And I don't care how, I don't know how long it's going to take, but we're going to find it. We're going to tell it.
So let's talk about that story as it unfolded. And again, it will be linked in the show notes to this episode. You interviewed, I think in the story you said you reached out to 14 colleges and universities. And it seems like you were able to interview maybe not all of them, but quite a few of them. And there are officials, it seems like, and this is where the education curve comes in for people in our audience. It seems to me like a college or university has to designate a certain official to work with international students and getting them into the country and onto campus. And so those are the officials that you interviewed for the story. Is that right?
Yes, for most of the universities. A couple of them, I talked to the head of international education, but I did try to speak to the officials, mostly because they're the ones who deal with the I-20 forms and the visas and just all the paperwork to get students here. So a lot of times they're that first line of contact for those students at the university.
Yeah. So what the gist, the headline of the story is that international students that either have been coming to school in the United States or want to come to school in the United States at one of these Church of Christ colleges or universities, some of them were not able to get into the country, or getting into the country was delayed, which means they would miss the start of the school year. So could you break it out for us? How, first of all, what federal policy? You mentioned that 36 countries were banned unless they improved their security policies or something like that. What is the federal policy in play here? How is its execution affecting these international students?
So there's actually a lot of federal policies in place. So I'm just going to kind of start you back at the beginning of the year and walk through the ones that are affecting the Christian universities. There are a lot in play that a lot are affecting public universities. We see the names like Harvard and Columbia in the news that have a much bigger impact, but that doesn't directly affect the Christian universities. So it all kind of started in January when President Trump re-entered office. He revoked a policy from the Biden administration that the ICE agents were not allowed on college campuses, churches, and some other locations that were kind of off limits. So President Trump's executive order revoked that, so ICE agents could go on campus. And that's what we saw a lot of this spring, with students getting their visas revoked, their international forms, getting those canceled or denied. And then we also saw a lot of students were deported. That was just all over the country, not at the Christian universities. There were 2 students over at Oklahoma Christian in Oklahoma City whose visas were revoked in April, and they were eventually restored. So as far as I know, those students are still on campus. But that was kind of the only major effect with the Christian universities we saw last semester. Mm-hmm. So then come May, the Department of State sent out a memo to all of the consulates and embassies pausing visa appointments. And they said, hey, we're working on some new vetting policies for applicants. Don't make any more appointments. We'll let you know when you can resume. That was the gist of the memo with that. And they sent a press release out. And then somehow some newspapers got a leaked cable, just with a little bit of more of that information. So then in the middle of that pause, President Trump sent out an executive order banning 12 countries from entering the U.S., and then 7 were restricted with whose visas could come in. And a lot of those were the student visas and the business visas were not allowed to come back into the U.S. And a lot of those citations came from the overstay report saying that immigrants or non-immigrants who were visiting the U.S. on these visas were coming into the country and then staying longer than they were allowed to, and just nobody was catching it until they left when we had that documentation. So that's what he cited with a lot of those. And then we didn't really have many countries affected with that, with students at the Christian campuses, but that's just kind of the basis for that. And then visa appointments resumed early mid-June. And another Department of State cable was sent out to embassies saying applicants' social media has to be made public. And that was the big thing with vetting policy, is now the agents who are looking into applicants for visas go through social media just for any red flags. Just there's not really a clear list that was revealed of what they're looking for, but just whatever red flags. When they're like, hey, this person probably shouldn't come in, they're now looking for that on Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook, whatever social media that the applicants have. And that was a big thing. But with that, the visa appointments were also resumed. But at this point, there had been a 3-week delay of no appointments. So that really pushed a lot of students off. And then Marco Rubio released that cable with the 36 countries and said, hey, there's something that needs to be changed here. I looked into just kind of a lot of the U.S. relations with those countries, and it could have been like security. It could be anything from terrorism to just make how they verify their identification. Really just a lot of things that are the U.S. security was kind of wary of, that Rubio said, hey, take 60 days to implement any of these or else you could be at risk of being banned or restricted like these other 19 countries. And that 60-day period actually ended mid-August.
Okay.
So we are past that period at any point. I looked shortly after that period, and there were no other countries added to the restrictions list. Whether that's happened now or could happen, I have no idea. But that time period, that grace period of, hey, start making changes is up. So we could be seeing more action in the future. The biggest thing that happened, though, was the visa delays. And with that 3-week pause, a lot of students coming into the U.S. to attend Christian colleges for the first time could not get appointments until mid-August, November even. Some of the officials at the schools are telling me that their students, the first available appointment was mid-fall. And so I was like, well, what does that mean for them? And students are allowed to come in until they can get that visa interview, so they can't start the semester. So if they had an appointment like end of August or September, I did talk with some of the PDSOs and they said students still have to wait till January, just citing culture shock and wanting to set the students up for success, because trying to come in the middle of the semester for the first time, struggling to catch up in classes, you're already a couple weeks behind, on top of culture shock and adjusting to a new culture for the first time. The officials decided it's better for you to transition at the semester and just come in next semester. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of them are offering online classes. Some of the school like Oklahoma Christian has a program in Rwanda for students who are stuck there to start taking classes until they can make it over to campus. But the big thing is online school doesn't require a visa. So they don't need an F or a J visa to start taking classes online. So they can start online and then just transition at the earliest semester that they can get back into the U.S.
When students from other countries want to come to the United States, they obviously have to get a visa to be here. Is that something they have to renew each school year?
Yes. I don't know the exact timing, but I do know that there is a renewal process. It might have been Freed Hardman. One of the officials, rather, was telling me about a student who went home for the summer and was trying to get his visa renewed, but they wouldn't approve it. Even though he's already been in the country, they wouldn't let him back in.
Yeah. And these visas,
it kind of depends.
So these visa interviews, these are interviews the students have with federal agents from the Department of State?
Yes. So students will go through the application process and then make an appointment with the consulate or the embassy in their country and the officials there with, I don't remember, it might be Customs and Border Patrol or Immigration and Customs and whatever government entity is over those in those countries for the U.S. They'll go in and make an appointment with the agent, and then that is the next step to then vetting to then get approved for a visa.
And it sounds like the countries that there are, you gave us several numbers here. There was an executive order banning 12 countries and restricting 7 countries. That was back earlier in the summer. And then it sounds like the most recent, the Secretary of State, there were 36 countries that were banned. And the impetus there is security, right? It's national security. So they
have not been banned yet. They're at risk of being banned if they don't make changes to improving their security measures.
Got it. And so students from these countries are the ones that are having trouble getting their visas to come study. And
yes, I don't remember what all these countries are from. A lot of the officials didn't specifically mention countries that students were from. I only had a few examples of that. Yeah. It was just, but I think some of them were just because some schools like Harding, we have a lot of students from African countries. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of African countries on that list. Thankfully, Harding has not. And I spoke with actually our international education about this, that as far as we know, there aren't any students who are delayed here, which is really good.
Is it just first-time visa applicants that are not getting in from these countries, or is it students that they've gone to school for 2 years and they're coming back for their third year and now they're not able to get into the country?
Yeah, for most of them, it is first-time applicants.
First-time.
So because they're trying to get a visa for the first time, there is that one example that I mentioned earlier of a student who went home and was trying to get his visa renewed and he couldn't. Mm-hmm. But a lot of international students also stay in the U.S. over the summer. Yeah. And they're either working or they have internships to where some of them just don't leave, so they don't have to get their visa renewed unless they were to go home or their visa expires. But if they're already here on a valid visa, then that isn't a problem.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything in particular that they're looking for when they look at these student applicants' social media? Like, have there been any kind of guidelines that are released about these are the red flags that would make someone a national security risk if we let them into the country versus family photos, that kind of thing? Mm-hmm.
There is a list. I don't have access to it. As far as I could find now, it's not leaked to the press. A lot of it, a couple examples I could find are things maybe like anti-Semitism or affiliations with terrorists or just posting about protesting or ideologies that are anti-American or line up with terrorist organizations, or just kind of a red flag of then the security is like, maybe we shouldn't let this person into this country if they have ties to this group. Yeah. But that list was never released and is still pretty tightly under wraps with the government. So people can't, I guess, I don't know, maybe people can't like scrub their social media or anything, but they just haven't released it.
Mm-hmm. So do you get any sense of how many international students this is affecting at colleges and universities in our Church of Christ circles? And how many colleges and universities said that they're having to deal with this on some level?
Yeah, I think all of them that have international programs are experiencing it to some degree. There were a couple I spoke with that don't have international programs yet, so obviously they're not feeling the ramifications. It really depends on the size of the school and their international program. Some of the smaller schools, if they only have a handful of students, they are still experiencing it, but not to the scale of a larger school that might have 100 or a couple hundred students, where maybe some of those are experiencing it. I think, trying to think of all the numbers, I think a lot of them on average were maybe like 20 to 30, like definitely under 50 for most of them, or just a smaller group, because it is mostly just this incoming class that's affecting it and not necessarily all the returning students. So it's just a matter of how many international students are coming in for the first time and how many of them had their appointments delayed.
So you spoke to the people, these colleges and universities, whose job it is to help international students get onto campus and enroll in classes. And so did you get a sense from them that this is a hiccup, like this is just an adjustment that's happening with the new administration and things will normalize? Or did you get a sense from them that it could be more difficult in the future, or, you know, maybe they can't even predict what's going to happen in the future with their international programs? What kind of things did they share with you about how their jobs are going and how they think their jobs are going to change in the years ahead?
It's honestly a mix of all of it. I don't think per se their jobs are going to change very much. We didn't really talk about that. A lot of it depends on the administration, because we saw with President Trump coming in and reversing that 2021 policy in a few years, the next president could very well reverse some of these policies. And it just depends on where the country's at, who gets elected to be in office. A lot of them do think that they haven't seen this exactly before, but there have been issues or problems like holdups like this, to where most of them are not worried because it's not affecting them on a large scale. It's just kind of a case-by-case basis. But one of the officials I spoke to said that he reached out to it was the program that is over all the documents that students have to apply for, like the I-20 and all their forms to come into the U.S. He reached out to them and they said, we don't know anything. We don't know what's going on. And so there is a little bit of uncertainty when those entities aren't getting information. So the officials don't know how to help their students in some cases. If they have questions, the people above them don't even have answers.
Yeah.
So most of them did think that it would just kind of calm down. I interviewed them all over the summer. So most students weren't on campus. So a lot of them were anticipating a little bit more communication and struggle with the semester starting in August. But after that, they didn't seem too worried at the moment that it would be long-term. But as we've seen with some of these policies, we can see anything change very quickly.
A last question here. Let's talk about you. You're a senior, so you're in your last year there at Harding. What do you hope is next for you after your big summer at the Christian Chronicle, your last big year at Harding? Where do you hope you land next?
I honestly have no idea. I don't graduate until next December, in December of 26. I'm actually going to graduate a semester earlier than my projected track.
Really?
So I haven't really thought about where exactly I want to go. I know I want to go to a newspaper, and there's a couple ideas I have of what I want to do. Like, dream job would be travel. Like Audrey, I know a couple episodes ago, you guys talked about how she'd travel to 18 countries with the Chronicle. Yeah. And if I could find a newspaper that lets me do that, that would be awesome. I love traveling and just exploring other cultures and being able to report all that. But I'm also just with the true crime, with the research, I do love the legal side of reporting and just working with covering court cases, kind of on the crime beat a little bit. So if I could find one of those, that would be great. But just honestly open to wherever God takes me.
All right. Well, everyone who just listened to this can say that they knew Kenzie James when. So whatever you do, you're off to a really great start. Everything you've done so far, and that's pointing in a very positive direction. So Kenzie James is a senior multimedia journalism major at Harding University in Searcy, Arkansas. She was one of our summer interns at the Christian Chronicle. We'll put a link to all of her stories, including her last one about how federal policies are affecting international students at colleges and universities in the Church of Christ Heritage. Kenzie, great work, and thank you for being on our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. We hope that something you heard in this episode encouraged, enlightened, or enriched you in some way. If it did, thanks be to God, and please pay it forward. Subscribe to this podcast and share it with a friend. Recommend and review it wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Your subscription, recommendation, and review help us reach more people. Please send your comments, ideas, and suggestions to podcast@christianchronicle.org. And don't forget, our ministry to inform and inspire Christians and congregations around the world is a nonprofit ministry that relies on your generosity. So if you like the show and you want to keep it going and make it even better, please make a tax-deductible gift to the Christian Chronicle at christianchronicle.org/donate. The Christian Chronicle podcast is a production of the Christian Chronicle Incorporated, informing and inspiring Church of Christ congregations, members, and ministries around the world since 1943. The Christian Chronicle's managing editor is Calvin Cockrell, editor-in-chief Bobby Ross Jr., and president and CEO Eric Trigestad. The Christian Chronicle podcast is written, directed, hosted, and edited by B.T. Irwin and is produced by James Flanagan at Podcast Your Voice Studios in the Motor City, Detroit, Michigan, USA. Until next time, may grace and peace be yours in abundance.